G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks After Ukraine War update for the 20th of the 12th. There's no ceasefire for Christmas, there is no rest for the weary, no redemption for the wicked. However, I'd just like to show you a few things before I get into the news update. First off, this how cheap drones are right now. They've really crashed out. You could get a basic quadcopter chassis for $20. Right? This is of course the lowest of the low. Your high end, as you can see, is $1,200. The drone they're using predominantly in Ukraine, around $170 for the chassis. These drones are very popular. And, of course, Ukraine and Russia and a lot of European buyers are buying them. I think last time we looked, Temu was doing $4 million a month just on drones. So, the war profiteering is booming for China. Booming. But they're not the only ones. These kits are being bought. They've been bought by, allegedly, racing clubs and other fronts, not just in Australia, but UK, France, Germany, and Italy. And they have been assembled, sent to Ukraine through Poland predominantly, although some make their way through Romania, where they are armed. They are armed in Western factories, owned by Ukrainians. Ukraine is making a killing off this war. Selling. Ukrainians are selling these drones. So you have the West buying these drones from China. The West then selling these drones to Ukrainian companies who then sell these drones to the Ukrainian government. And the Ukrainian government is being funded by Western money. Right? So there are many hands pilfering along the way in the guise of supply chain. Okay, so trust me when I say these bloated supply trains are corruption. And despite what India has said, the BBC and many others in 2024, 2024, 2023, 2022, 2025, October, November, December, they've always, even India, defense loans in the Russian arms market, there are Russian arms finding their way to Ukraine through India. India, of course, is denying this, but it has been revealed by the BBC, who I thought gave up investigative journalism a long time ago. But they have actually found that inside Indian munition firms, people from Czech Republic, in Italy, and other countries who buy, it's called indirect supply, by the way, and India, despite its protest from Moscow saying, you're violating the BRICS agreement, right? You're not supposed... As I said, India is fueling this war. And that India and China are both chipping away at Russia. Putin is now in a very difficult position. Europe and India are working together to destroy Russia. And China, the opportunist, has now moved in for a land grab. It looks like China is going to violate its... Is it the 1968 or 1974 agreement? There's a couple. China and India and Russia borders were set by foreigners. And now, of course, they want to reset their borders. But don't forget, China is an illegitimate country. It is built on an empire that invaded other countries, and the so-called liberators went in and took more countries, predominantly West Tibet, tried to take Nepal, and a couple of tiny little neither here nor there states, no man's land, so to speak, in the Himalayas. Now, this isn't really about arms industry. This is about all living space, okay? China isn't after living space. They're after water. Their target is the ice flows in central Siberia and the Himalayas, because those will supply water. See, this is the thing. China may have one of the highest rainfalls in the world, but it's focused. China can't adequately redistribute its water, so now they're trying to pipeline water from the Himalayas because they don't have enough, right? Their desalination projects, everything. They're still, right, they have groundwater problems. They are still short hundreds of millions of tons of water per year for crops. That's why they're importing food. They're far behind in all their projects. So, of course, weakening Russia, China also wants to take over the Russian air defenses because they failed in Cambodia. Thank God. I mean, Thailand. You may think Thailand violated its ceasefire agreement. They did so with tacit approval from the United States to take care of the Chinese in southern Cambodia, who were setting up to attack Thailand. If Thailand hadn't attacked first, who knows how many civilians would have died in cross-border shelling by bandit groups posing as Cambodian military. They're trying to set up all these no-go zones across Southeast Asia, ruled by Chinese gangs, pretty much using the same revolutionary model that Mao used, which is being replicated in Europe right now by the Islamists. But the Indians' arms industry is doubled, and they want to double again by 2029. Right? Now, of course, you know who's turning a blind eye to all this? And India is not only supplying Ukraine and Russia, they're also supplying Gaza and Israel. They also buy Israeli arms and sell those to Russia, Ukraine, and other countries. They're also allegedly supplying missile parts to many countries. Yeah, it's a murky world, folks. But most people want to bury their head in the sand. Now, hopefully the map will load properly this time. It was working when I was off earlier, but just yesterday as I was recording, it just decided to stop working for some reason. I thought I couldn't find out why, so I just scrubbed cache and started over. But scrubbing cache didn't seem to work. There's no further advances here in the north. Neither here nor there. Probing attacks across the ring. Russia is fending off Ukrainian drone attacks. But they do hold more of Kupiansk than they did before. They have increased Russia's back. Remember, Russia is not rushing in. No pun intended. They are deliberately wearing down the Ukrainians. This is a death trap. The Ukrainians come in to try and retake Kupiansk. Why? Pride. It's nothing. There's no strategic value, right? Kupiansk is no longer supplying a front line that is overrun. Okay, Russia overran the front line. The second line of defense is crumbled. It's broke. Okay, it does not have a consistent highway, right? It's under Russian fire control. Okay? And here, of course, it's been flanked. Cut. Now, of course, the Russian offensive here is slowed. Right? It's molasses. But it is slow though it is moving. It's just so slow, you literally consider it molasses. But now and again, the map will suddenly update. But for now, we only have a bit of advance here in the north. We have a bit of advance here a significant advance here in Kursk. Remember, yesterday Zelensky was bragging how he kicked the Russians out of Kursk. There's no Russians in Kursk. We are victorious. We are liberating. We are taking the fight to the invader. And they lost territory. Why are people watching Ukrainian videos? I do not understand. I know that most of these pro-Ukrainian channels don't show the maps. They don't show you anything. So why would you trust them? They've not earned your trust, but so many people are just in a fugue state. They want the comfortable lie. But here we have definitely stalled, but Russian probing attacks. They're still launching attacks into Myriad. They're still fighting they're still got the death trap running. You know, the Ukrainians are still running in, going down the rail line, thinking they can capture central Pavlovsk. Now, they did surprise yesterday, the Ukrainians did surprise the Russians coming in under the cover of fog, but now that the Russians know that the Ukrainians know how Russia took Pavlovsk, and that seeing Ukraine tried yesterday the same thing, they're waiting for them. So, Russia's continuing to advance here. This shows yesterday, this is the area I was talking about yesterday. I call it the in-between. I couldn't remember this time. It's because Novo Pavlovskia is repeated several times throughout Ukraine. Novo, as I said, the Russians, the Ukrainians allegedly, did, but allegedly, again, claiming they liberated Olk again. No, they did fend off the Russians, but the Russians haven't gone anywhere. They're still on the outskirts. This is the offensive from a month ago, maybe 6 weeks. It's the longest lasting offensive that's actually been successful. But here again, you can see the Russians are pushing back here. Every time the Ukrainians have a little win somewhere, they've lost territory elsewhere. Now, some channels are reporting that the Russians were in central Hulapol. No, they did shell it, and they did send in probing attacks, but no. Their primary lines are still on the outskirts of town. They are hitting it primarily with tanks that come along this road, fire into Hulapol, and then retreat. And then they watch the Ukrainian response. Most of the time, the Ukrainians are not coming out of their bunkers. They are hunkered down for the winter, trying to cope and seethe against the Russian winter offensive, which is slow-moving molasses. Remember, it's freezing. Okay, the Ukrainian air temperature is literally the temperature of freezing water. Okay, so if there's any rain in Ukraine, it is ice by the time it hits the ground. Instead of having snow, you have this crunchy crystals. You don't have proper snowflakes. Snowflakes aren't forming. Probably expected heavy snow to start soon. And that's when the T-90s come out to play, because they're built for winter. They are built for snow. They are snow-tracked tanks. They're T-90... I know T-90M is used currently. They're used as in anti-drone operations. But I'm talking about your T-90 with your big gun, right? Not your little pea shooter T-90. I'm saying that Russia might be bringing out the big guns. These are T-90s with an artillery mount. And if indeed they come, but indeed Russia doesn't have that many of them. But look at the scale of the war. They don't. Right? I think 200 pieces of artillery would annihilate most Ukrainian towns. Not your small ones. I mean, something like this, these towns, no. Right? Just your small ones, like, Myriad. Look at Myriad. If Ukraine is asking Google to not publish photos, but yeah, we know Russia's trying to capture the road to Zaporozhye. Well, hold the road to Zaporozhye. They're trying to cauldron this central area. It's slow, but they're working on it. Kherson is another death trap. They retreated to draw in the Ukrainians, and They basically know every inch of Kherson, marked every road, everything's on their map, and every time the Ukrainians set up a machine gun or a drone or anything, it's artilleried or fired upon by light rocket artillery. The drone attacks continue on southern ports. These are ports predominantly involved in launching of drone attacks on the Sebastopol. Ukraine is claiming they've sunk the Black Fleet. How many times have they sunk the Black Fleet? They've sunken some ships. Now, Turkey's issued a warning to both Ukraine and Russia that they'll close the straits to the Black Sea if the attacks on shipping don't stop. Now, both sides are guilty of this, but but Ukraine is guilty, and so is Europe, and so are many, right? Russia's not the only one with ships that are flagged in other countries. Russia, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Turkey, all the Black Sea, right, is full of ships flagged in other countries. India, but predominantly Liberia. So, and of course, they're often crewed by people from Turkey, Philippines, or they have officers from Netherlands, Britain. So, they don't have a lot of these shadow fleets. They are operated by huge conglomerates, and they often are playing both sides of the fence. So that's the state of the war. Now, of course, there are key events, most of which is there is fighting. There's lots of propaganda. But Russia has shelled Novosibirsk, and Kiev Independent reports also attacks on the dockyards of Odessa. Normally they say the people of Odessa, but for once they're actually, sorry, not dockyards, the power supply. They cut the lines again. So you can harden bunkers, just cut the power to them. Good luck surviving in a concrete bunker without electricity, I tell ya. Now, of course, EU leaders have borrowed from capital markets to fund Ukraine for the next 2 years. But as I said yesterday, they're 50 million short. I wonder that's because the Kominsky gang want their little piece of the pie. This is a very important finger. It is for the counting of the money. Now, of course, Russia has released the results of its year. They refuse to negotiate giving up the land as part of statements from Zelensky that he is not prepared to discuss territory even, that Europe continues to demand stealing of Russian assets, because after all, they took out a loan, they need some way to pay it, right? But of course, whatever they stole, they have to pay back. Putin is very confident that he's assembled a team of lawyers, both Russian and internationalists, who will tear Europe apart in the court of arbitration and World Trade Organization. But first they have to launch the case, and that is exactly what's happening right now. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is under fire, but he believes still that they've made progress to ending this war. He won't see a surrender, only a negotiated settlement. And that's what they want. They don't want Ukraine to surrender. They want a negotiated settlement, right? To reach a ceasefire. But Ukraine keeps calling it surrender. So, this is the problem. They're playing sick word games. They're arguing over language on a document. Alright? Ukraine says, no, it's surrender. You're wanting us to surrender. Give up land, let's surrender. No, we can't do that. Yeah. Then Russia just says, well, Ukraine won't negotiate. And says, we're not asking, we're telling. Read the winning. When the winner of the war is told to give up, then what is, but of course, the childish liberal establishment goes, nah, and we won't give up. Yeah, but you won't fight the war, so Russia doesn't care what you think, okay? Russia knows eventually you're going to steal the assets. They're double daring you to steal them, you stupid muppets. Because they know what a disaster that is going to be when you try to sell them. Worse, okay, we know you're trying to steal them and sell them to Saudi Arabia, BlackRock, the 12 sovereign funds. You're trying to, bail out Canada, bail out France, Germany, Italy, Greece, right? We'll get to that shortly. Now, Russian-made reconnaissance drone was found in Western Turkey. These are probably long-range drones that lost their way when they were jammed over Ukraine because they're sent on a southern trajectory. They just keep going, right? These are high-altitude UAVs known as Osprey. They're about the size of a Global Hawk. They don't have the same distinct profile as a Global Hawk, and they are strictly reconnaissance. But they're also used to monitor shipping in the Black Sea, and they are being jammed by British ships off the coast of Romania. British spy ships. No, they're not British spy ships. They're fishing boats. Now, Trump is going to Florida, where he is expected to meet, I think, with the Russian foreign delegation. I don't think the Russian foreign minister will be there. I think this is just the negotiating team. But there's also the Russian security advisor, Rustem Umerov. There's also the Turkish foreign minister and the Qatari prime minister. They're putting together an international group. It is expected that others will send legal representatives, but not ministerial level representatives. That Italy, Hungary, Estonia, and other countries want an end to this war. Some of them are opposition groups like the Alternative for Deutschland, the French Republic. Now, the French Republic is actually, though a slightly left-leaning group, they do oppose Macron, and they're considering a joint resolution to oust Macron, but it has to be in such a way that it'll lead to elections, not a right-wing government. I can understand that if you're from the point of view of politics. You do need elections to resolve the deep divisions in France, where we all know that Macron and his cronies, let's just say, got familiar with shredders. Okay, so Axis is reporting that, there's going to be military and working groups represented for Ukraine, including the chief executive of the Russian Direct Investment Fund. Now, remember, Russia is sitting on the world's second largest deposits of many minerals, and this is why Europe is rubbing their hands together like the Merchant of Venice on debt collection day. But, of course, the reality is far deeper, steeped in blood and misinformation. That Kolominsky is the man allegedly betrayed by Ukraine. That was all a ploy. It now turns out that Kolominsky is the man at the receiving end of a lot of this Ukrainian money, and that he is not in exile in Switzerland. That is all a lie, a orchestrated lie to take attention off him while he set up organizations to funnel money to buy arms for Ukraine, and of course take huge profits along the way for him and his partner Zelensky. Now, he was an informational manager. He owned the television production network Kremlin 95. He set up offshore accounts, even in the name of Kolominsky and Zelensky and partners, as early as 2012. This was no accident. The Pandora Papers revealed that deposits were regularly made, not just by Kolominsky, by others over a 2-year period, right? Now, here it claims 41 million was taken out of Pivotal Bank through a series of intermediary countries, aka Kolominsky's partners would borrow money from Kolominsky's bank, never repay them. The bank bellied up and would get bailed out and they expected to be bailed out. When Russia didn't bail them out, Zelensky and partners turned to Europe, and they created this Ukraine Media Crisis Center, and they started talking about red lines and here they have meetings with Kolominsky and his partners all the way back to 2012, where Ukraine's now chief of staff were discussing conducting business in Ukraine and the energy sector, and how Europe was their new daddy, and how they tricked Putin into withdrawing from Kiev. Of course, there was the IMF. Now, Putin had to withdraw his support for the Kiev government, right? They weren't paying their debts, right? They kept promising. When they came to power in 2019, they kept promising, but saying that people wanted peace, they didn't want war, but they're forcing us in a brutal conflict in Donbass. Most people, of course, are turning a blind eye to all this. Kolominsky is allegedly taking on the oligarchs, but not all of them. He's only taking on those who are not connected to Kolominsky and those in Kolominsky's orbit. Those who fall into his orbit and sacrifice some of their wealth are now given a comfortable exile in Switzerland, again, where they set up satellite companies to buy drone parts, buy tractor parts. These alleged tractor parts, these are all part of the Ukrainian rebuilding fund. We don't really know what's going on with these tractor parts and other things, but it appears that they're putting together a takeover of farming in Ukraine. These big, some form of farm conglomerate run by BlackRock. On paper, it looks legitimate, but in reality, there's no formal agreements, right? They're just walking in and taking land as the debtor. There's even murder charges that have been dropped against people who fall in line. And, of course, the apathy, of course, the Ukrainian elites, pretty much are robbing Europe, but it's a rotting edifice that's cracking. The stench is floating across Europe, and Europe doesn't know what to do. Because while Europe has got inflation under control, remember, that's only because they got a trade deal that only happened because of a trade deal with Trump to secure their energy at a fixed rate. It always comes down to this. They use war as leverage, right? But a Swiss armed forces veteran, defense analyst, Mikhail Valterson, was interviewed by Sputnik. Now, Sputnik published this and updated it. Now, they were talking to him about the peace process, and he was told them it's complicated. Why is it complicated? Well, it's complicated because the Ukrainian leadership is desperate not to appear losers to the Ukrainian population. This is partly blinded by their own propaganda. Ukraine is very good at information warfare, and has convinced a large part of Europe and the Ukrainian population the war is at a stalemate and is favourable to Ukraine. But that is not the reality. But they can't have elections until peace deal is on the table. But he wants a peace deal on the table that will allow him to retain power. He wants a miracle, much like Hitler did in 44 to 45. Now, yes, Hitler was waiting for the nuclear miracle, but what he didn't know is that 6 months earlier, and most of the world didn't know that Alan Dulles had travelled to Italy, spoken to some of the Italians there who developed the original nuclear reactor, who trained the Germans, named names, helped get them out of Germany, and in return they too got to get rinsed into new identities through Argentina and the Red Cross. And this is it's a different time, a different level of technology. The world was moving at a much slower pace back then. But this time we have the internet, many, many, many people and they may not believe Russia's the good guy or believe Russia's the bad guy. It doesn't matter what they believe. Ultimately, what it is the majority of Gen X's and Gen Z's and not so much millennials and Gen Y, but a lot of Zoomers are skeptical right now. They don't know what to believe. They do see and have heard history changing many times in their lifetime. Zoomers, of course, are seeing this and going, well, what were boomers hiding? What are they still hiding? That's why so many people now are skeptical, not just about the American government. Skepticism in the American government dates back to the lies about JFK and the bombing of Kuchi, but people actually forget that. But actually, the modern era with the lies about JFK's assassination, the constant cover-ups, the people who disappear, the people who keep coming up with evidence about Lee Harvey Oswald and the FBI, and the CIA involvement, and the number of coups the CIA have enacted around the world. Russia's advanced 6 square kilometers in 2025. It's not really that much, but they still continue to advance. And they've taken key regions. That's the point, right? They are eating the Ukrainian economy. And right now, Ukraine has lost 20% of its economy and lost 18%. Some say it's higher. There is an assessment. People are not sure exactly where the front lines really are because a lot of the times the Ukrainians will leave men behind, and Russia will leave them alone for a while like they had in Kupiansk, and then they'll go around them and cut them off, and then you have fighting in Pavlovsk. So this is the thing, right? What you talk about today in 2 days' time may not count. So it may not be much, but these are important cities in the Ukrainian economy. Mariupol, Sevastopol, these all the way up to Lyman. There's was heavy industry. Ukraine primarily was agricultural, though, but they did have their own domestic steel industry, and they did have an aircraft industry, but predominantly Ukrainian Air Force. And predominantly they were selling aircraft parts, predominantly for the MiG-27 to Russia. And of course, as Russia moves to the Su-27 and moves away, and the MiG-31, Ukraine, of course, shifted to Poland and other countries. But even Poland is now, and Poland wants F-16s, and they too want to shift away from Soviet-era equipment. I can understand that. But they want to modernize and update a lot of their aircraft to NATO, because a lot of their aircraft don't have NATO compatibility. Eastern Europe is 10 years behind not Poland, but most of Eastern Europe is behind on modernization. But so is Russia, so is Ukraine, and that's why. But it's not a stalemate. It's a slow molasses. And Russia's doing this deliberately, because this way they could stop at any time. They know eventually the Americans will put their foot down, but Europe is trying to pressure America to put their foot down. But Trump doesn't want when he knows when he puts the foot down, right, that's where Russia will do their most vicious attacks on Ukraine and then stop. And if Ukraine retaliates, then what's Trump going to do? I mean, Ukraine has done this to Russia several times. As I said many times, the war will get its most vicious as it reaches its end. That's the current state of the war. It is slowing down but not stopping. and it's only slowing down to the weather. As you can see, their days are mostly clear, but soon that will change, and I think it's going to be about a 6-week heavy winter, then 2 weeks of thaw, and then we'll see whether or not Russia launches a spring offensive. That'll be when the T-80s and the lighter tanks come out. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. I really appreciate those who have supported the channel. Now, there are a number of ways you can. Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. Thank you to each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.